The film opens with a man named Edgar sitting in a park. It's 19th century Baltimore, Maryland. The movie goes in flashback, where we see several policemen rush to a building from which a screaming woman can be heard. The police enter the apartment. The room in which the murder was committed was locked from the inside, and even the window is locked. The dead body of a woman is sprawled on the floor. The police are unable to solve the mystery of how the murderer escaped from the crime scene. They also find the dead body of her 12-year daughter stuffed in the chimney of the room. After observing the crime scene, Detective Fields finds a hidden lock in the window, and when he touches the lock with his pocket knife, the window opens, which shocks everyone. Detective Fields discovers that the crime resembles a fictional murder in a short story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, that he once read. We again see Edgar in the present. Edgar is a murder mystery writer and he is about to die. We again see flashbacks of the past days running through his mind. Edgar is penniless, broke, and out of work. He argues with his editor to publish his reviews, but the editor says that he will not publish his worthless reviews and that he wants Edgar to write ferocious murder mysteries. Edgar says he is out of stories and can't write murder mysteries anymore. In the next scene, a man tied by chains asks for mercy and shouts that he is only a critic. He is tied to a wooden board and a pendulum is hanging over his body and a giant sharp blade is tied to it. The pendulum is coming near the writer slowly, and finally, he is cut in half by the pendulum. The man is Griswold and he is Edgar's competitor. The next morning, while Edgar is brought to Fields for questioning, Detective Fields informs Edgar that he has read Edgar's stories and someone is staging murders exactly like his stories. The murder of Griswold is staged like Edgar's another story. Edgar insists that his stories are just a work of fiction. The police also question Edgar's editor, who tells them they hated each other, but Edgar doesn't have the balls to kill. Edgar is shown the dead body of Griswold and Fields gives him a mask that was worn by the victim, and inside the mask, a quote from Edgar's story is written. Edgar tells Fields that this mask points to one of his stories named Mask of the Red Death. The story is about an arrogant character, Prospero, who arranges a carnival party where everyone comes in disguise. He also informs Fields that such a party is organized the next day by Charles Hamilton, who is the father of Edgar's girlfriend Emily. Detective Fields meets Charles Hamilton and informs him about the murder spree that is going around the city, and that they suspect that the next murder will take place at his party. Fields asks Mr. Hamilton to allow his men to come to the party to apprehend the murderer. Mr. Hamilton reluctantly agrees to the proposal. The next night, the ball begins and everyone is in their fancy costumes. Meanwhile, the police make their entry too. Everyone is dancing to the piano music. Edgar and Emily are dancing when suddenly a horse rider dressed in a skeleton costume breaks in. Emily's father shoots him, and the horse rider falls to the ground. After removing his mask, the man reveals that he was advised to deliver a message to them and hands them a note, which read that Emily has been kidnapped and the murderer wants to play a game with Edgar. The killer wants Edgar to start writing again, and it should be published in the newspaper, and whenever he will kill someone he will leave a clue behind. These clues will eventually lead to the location of Emily, and if he doesn't like the story he will kill Emily. In the next scene, Emily is taken in a box. She is shouting for help, but an anonymous voice instructs her to stop screaming, and scared Emily complies. The scene changes and a doctor is giving a lecture to his students about the dead body. When he opens the box, it turns out to be the dead body of a lady who was murdered recently. Police are called in for investigation, and Edgar is with them. After examining the victim's body, Detective Fields asks Edgar if this murder also resembles any of his stories. Edgar agrees and tells the story named The Mystery of Marie Roget. Upon inquiring, they come to know that the woman was a theater artist. It is concluded that the next murder will be committed at the theater. When they reach the theater, they come to know that one of the theater workers is missing. They start searching for the missing person. At one moment Edgar was about to catch the murderer, but as it was too dark Edgar couldn't see the murderer's face. The murderer opens the rope of the theater's curtain and Edgar falls on the ground and the murderer escapes. Detective Fields and Edgar start searching the theater again. They find a box and a human tongue inside. They are unable to understand what the murderer's intentions are. The scene flips, and Emily scratches the box in which she is confined to breathe air. People burn down Edgar's house as they believe that Edgar's stories are the reason behind the murders. Edgar moves to Detective Fields' place. Officer Fields asks Edgar if he has written about sailors, as the man who has disappeared from the theater was a sailor on a ship named Fortunato. Edgar gets shocked as in one of his stories, Fortunato is the name of a character. The story is about revenge, and Fortunato was entombed between the walls of the tunnels beneath the city. He tells Fields that a similar place is the underground water tunnels of the city, and they should search these tunnels to find Emily. The police along with Edgar search the tunnels. There they see a newly built wall. They break the wall and see the corpse, which seems to be of Emily, but it is revealed that it's not her. Instead, it was the sailor who disappeared, and he was dressed in Emily's clothes. After examining the dead body, it is revealed that the tongue of the dead body is missing, and the human tongue that was discovered in the box at the theater was of the sailor. 2 other clues are found on the dead body: a pocket watch that was stopped at 12:27 and stuffed into his mouth, and a tattoo on his back that had some flesh carved out of it. After seeing this, Edgar concludes that this is a map and that the killer has given the coordinates of Emily's location. They decode the location on a map according to the position of the hands of the watch and the tattoo on the corpse, which is the Holy Cross Church. They reach the church and start searching for Emily. The killer is also in the church. A policeman finds him, but he kills the policeman. Detective Fields also sees him, but the killer shoots him and escapes. Edgar follows him, but the killer runs away. They find a grave with Emily's name on it, but fortunately, the grave was empty. Tired of this cat and mouse chase, Edgar writes one last newspaper column, offering his life in exchange for Emily's, suggesting that he could take poison if the killer releases Emily. On the other hand, we see Emily gets out of the coffin in which she was kept. But it was too late and the killer had already arrived. He sedates Emily and she gets unconscious. We see Edgar has finished writing his last story and sends it for publishing. The typesetter, Ivan, likes his story a lot and says that it is not Edgar's fault and he shouldn't blame himself for the murders. In the morning, Edgar's maid gives him the newspaper along with a note from the killer, accepting his terms. Henry asks the maid when it was delivered. The maid replies before the newspaper. Edgar asks her how is she so sure about it, and the maid says that the letter was beneath the newspaper. Edgar observes the letter and notices water droplet marks on the letter. He asks her maid, did it rain in the night, and the maid replies yes. Now Edgar is sure that the note was delivered long before the paper was distributed, making him conclude that the killer must work at the paper. Edgar rushes to confront his editor Henry, believing that Henry is the killer, but Henry is already dead, and another note is lying next to him. Now, only one man was left who knew the story before the paper was published, the paper's typesetter, Ivan. Edgar confronts Ivan, he congratulates Edgar, and offers him a drink. Ivan tells him that he is a huge fan of Edgar, and when Edgar stopped writing stories, he was disheartened and decided that he will make Edgar write again, and that's why he did all the murders. Ivan demands Edgar to drink the poison as promised. Edgar is helpless, he cannot kill Ivan as he is the only person who knows where Emily is. Edgar drinks the poison to save the love of his life. Ivan is a psychopath and that's why he liked Edgar's murder mysteries so much. He also tells Edgar that he is moving to Paris where he will do the same to another writer and that he will travel under the name of Reynolds. Before leaving, Ivan reads a quote from one of Edgar's stories, The Telltale Heart, which gives Edgar a clue that Emily is confined beneath the floor. As Ivan leaves, Edgar uses the last of his strength to tear up a false section of the floor and open a trapdoor leading to Emily's prison. Soon after, the police and ambulance arrive and take Emily with them. Edgar goes to the nearby park and sits on a bench waiting for his death as seen in the first scene of the movie. A man walking in the park recognizes him as the famous writer and asks if he is all right. Edgar can barely talk. He says to the stranger, tell Fields his last name is Reynolds. The man takes Edgar to the hospital, but he could not make it and dies due to the poison. Later, when Fields comes to view Edgar's corpse at the hospital, the doctor tells him that Edgar was insisting that his last name is Reynolds. Detective Fields ponders the meaning of the phrase, slowly connecting the dots. He understands to whom Edgar was pointing before his death. Ivan climbs into a carriage and is confronted by Fields. He lunges for the detective, and Fields shoots him at point-blank range and the movie ends. If you like our effort, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment. It encourages us to make more content for you. Also, please hit the bell icon so that you don't miss our new videos.